What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
I'm Gian, and we're here with a very special guest. We're here with Oliver Bateman, who is variously listed as a journalist, a lawyer, a historian, a strength athlete, but perhaps most relevant for our audience, the new host of the What's Left podcast.
Yeah.
Hi, Oliver. How's it going?
What's up, guys? Happy to be here. And yeah, I'm the third host to work with Amy Therese. So that's it's a big honor, but I am on there.
She's she's cycling through them, but no, we're delighted to hear you on there. You've done a few episodes now, right? I mean, I guess
I think we've got 6, 7 in there. There's one coming out soon it's going to fire them up. But yeah, it's gone well.
Well, we're definitely excited to hear a little bit about how you sort of ended up involved with that, and then some of your just your other writings as well. You are a prolific writer in various outfits, including, we discovered today, apparently the Dollar Shave Club Mel magazine.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's one of my biggest publication places, clients, however you want to say it. They're great to work with.
I hope so. We did rather unkindly pan an article they wrote they published last week.
I don't blame you. That article was utter hot garbage, to be honest. But that's like most articles. Like unless I write them, I don't trust them coming out. But and I'm serious. Like what? And I'll talk about this a little bit. But like editors will force you to drop. Not the ones I currently work with, but like the ones I have worked with will force you to drop buzzwords in there. They'll, mess around with the lead. They'll mess around with the conclusion, the kicker. They'll do whatever it takes to drive traffic. And it's really obnoxious. And so, I mean, some of these things end up being worse than they actually should be. I mean, they're going to be bad in some cases, but sometimes they become horrible. And like, they're like thoughts nobody would think, but somehow they're out there. And so, yeah, you're right. That, I mean, Amy and I trashed a book this week. It's like one of the worst books I've ever skimmed. And I've skimmed a lot of books. This one really sucked.
Well, it's good. We'll certainly get you to drop some buzzwords in that are relevant to our audience. So only fans,
toxic masculinity. That's a big one. Gaslighting. That's big.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you actually ended up involved with What's Left, because obviously you are a prolific writer and occasional Twitter personality. But it was a surprise to me when you turned up, a delightful one. But how did you get involved?
Well, I've been a very negative and pessimistic person for a really long time. So, when I was doing my PhD, 2007 to 2012, I was probably like the most negative, skeptical, and like furthest left, hardest line left, like nothing, but not only like far out left, but like nothing on the left is ever going to work type of leftist, because I'd sort of come up through the actual world of work and sort of seen like how miserable it is out there and how human nature works. So I was always quick to, sort of downplay the enthusiasm of folks. Well, years passed, and some of these, my cohort mates, ended up listening to What's Left after Ben had come. Ben pulled them in, and they were listening, and they thought that a lot of what Amy was saying and later tweeting was really similar to what I'd been saying for a long time. And so they urged me to connect with her, and I actually got to talking to her around the time that she was catching a lot of heat. I guess around the time she was catching a lot of heat for the Warren stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Being one of the first to just say this is a sort of a wrecker campaign, a problematic campaign, all this sort of stuff. And as then, What's Left went through a couple more stages. There was this brief moment, I think that for some people anyway, of hope that Bernie Sanders could win the election. That he was defeated. And then from there, I think Ben lost enthusiasm for the project. Amy wanted to keep it going. We had done some guest episodes, and it just seemed like a good time to step in and maybe make, What's Left is almost now like just the question of what is left, like what is left out there in the world. Not much, guys. It's not very hopeful. But that's not part of the project. We're not at that point in the dialectic yet. We're barely done with the analysis of what's wrong, which has always been my take. And that probably won't be done till I'm dead and gone, and you're dead and gone. Like, you're still going to be at the starting point of the dialectic. Maybe we always are. I don't know. But that was sort of how we talked through the project. And that meant that in the coming weeks, folks who are hungry for, like I say on Twitter, like hot tea, are going to get doses of it directed at these sort of like leftish products that aren't very good. I mean, we're just going to eviscerate them, that's, and I've not like, I had dealings with some of the people we've talked about, small ones, early on in like 2013, 14, when this kind of online left was sort of emerging was sort of emerging alongside the very, very trumped up, so to speak, and overblown alt-right. Mm-hmm. And I just, my salesman sense just started tingling even then. And I was like, one thing that my dad used to say is like, never trust anybody who quote unquote works in the labor movement, like, because that's not work, right? Like, it's, especially if you're not tied to a union or doing a job or anything of that nature. If you're just kind of like some kind of like gadfly or somebody that's on the wall, there's something up. I mean, somebody tweeted at Amy recently. I thought it was very accurate that I just got the sense that a lot of these folks, not all of them, I mean, I don't want to paint everybody with a broad brush, but I got a sense that some of these folks were just like rich kids looking for a way to make money doing nothing. And like, what could be better than socialism, from each according to their ability to their clout, to building their clout. So it's like a great scam. I mean, socialism means they don't have to work, right? If it works right. Great. And I kind of studied that from afar, because the type of writing I do, if people Google me or look at my website or anything like that, it's about as far removed from that stuff as possible. There's something that would be like a hot take, like an opinion piece here and there, but they're usually pretty narrow. Sometimes a stupid title has been slapped on them. Those are almost never, your own work, except for the place that I publish now, like my editor, Mel, who's just the editor-in-chief, former Playboy editor or Ringer, they just let me put whatever I want. Like, there's no touching of the stuff that I do. But in some of these cases, like, I don't produce that sort of stuff. Like, I produce long wrestler obituaries, analyses of territorial wrestling, tons of stuff about strength and fitness, and plenty of stuff that is aimed, because that world now is full of like LGBT folks, plenty of stuff aimed at that audience that, like, talks to those athletes, but just as athletes, they just happen to be there. So there's articles for me to write, but that's always been something that, and that's another thing. Like, if you look at stuff that I've done, like I did a thing on the Atlantic on like the state of muscle in 2019. And that piece is solid, and it covers some of these folks. Like, it covers some of my work already that I had done with some of those folks. But I kept things out that they were kind of trying to force in there. They were like, do you want to say that you're white? Do you want to say this? Like, no, my background is very complicated, but it's not something that it's not appropriate for this essay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that stuff seeps in. So without fighting it or contesting it, I just left it out and never put it in, And go ahead.
Oh, I'm curious in terms of like, your orientation towards that sort of stuff, because Amy obviously is a controversial figure among perhaps the kind of like rich kids who are doing socialism as a lifestyle brand thing. But clearly, you weren't shy about aligning yourself with her particular politics. Your own politics obviously have sort of avoided that and come from a materialist frame. But I'm kind of curious in terms of like what sort of response you've had, both through that affiliation, but in your journey through, as you say, sort of expressing any skepticism of this project over the last few years.
Well, I guess part of it for me, and I know like society has made strides in this way or that way, but I grew up in a household where, it's hard to say, but like, it's just hard to conceptualize, but like I'd sit with my dad on the couch, like 9 or 10 years old, and he would rewind the money shot of The Crying Game like 20 times. Like, our household was very, very open. to all kinds of strange stuff, but like it wasn't covered in any kind of like way, like they were trying to do this to be, seen or thought of, or it's hard to explain, but in some of these like weird little working class, stuff had seeped in that so when I arrived in grad school, like nothing shocked me. In other words, I remember being like 5 years old, and my dad watching a Popeye cartoon, and like Bluto dresses in drag to like trick Popeye. And my dad's like, "You might find this attractive, son. It happens." And I'm like, okay, Dad, you're all right.
That's good parenting.
So I filed it away. Yeah. And so he kind of broke down whatever barriers would have bothered. Like to me, I know for other folks, their upbringings were different, but like, certain barriers were knocked down a long time ago. Like I saw my parents do things that nobody should see. And so all this stuff people talk about now, like abolishing the family, all this sort of stuff, like my parents' marriage was so open. You could have like driven like a yacht into it, and like sometimes maybe there was some political content too, but maybe they were just all over the place. But I kind of went down that road. My own life is very conventional. I'm married. I have a kid. I work a corporate job during the daytime. So like that writing is just like cream. But I grew up with all this stuff. So it never, but it was also something that was like, to me, it was like a settled subject, right? I was like, this stuff's all fine. Like grandpa was on a submarine in World War II. And, one of the things, like the only stories he'd tell you would be like, how pretty the men were in the Philippines, like way before the McAfee guy tweeted about that. Like, again, like you're 8, 9 years old, and he's got like this gleam in his eye when he's talking to you about the enemas he gets, and then this, and you're just like, all right. And again, this is Southwestern Pennsylvania. It's not, it's not like San Francisco or anything. It's just these people. And I don't think like they're so out of touch with the world in a way, and out of touch with other people, that all of this is normal. And I'm completely out of touch because I'm not going to any public school from the 3rd grade to the 9th grade. I'm just at home. I'm homeschooled. So this is all just like, it's what I do all day. I'm allowed to sit at home and read or play video games every day from 3rd grade to the 9th grade. My mom would come home from school and then teach me. She'd come home from teaching and then teach me.
Nice.
So I got to chill during the day. So all this stuff, by the time I got to grad school and I was like watching, it was kind of nascent in like 2008, 2009, all these things. It was a settled subject for me. And so was sort of like a kind of just, a left solution, a material solution is the only obvious solution. But everything, like anything that complicates that, anything that's like cream,
yep.
It might be fun. Like it might be fun. It might be interesting, but if you foreground it, or if you foreground it for money, right, it becomes ridiculous. Especially if you foreground it for money, talking about it and not actually doing it. Yeah. Like a lot of things are fun to do, but they aren't necessarily like fun to talk about doing.
That does seem to be so much of the project, right, of what you might call the quote unquote left, or that sort of leftoid sphere is discursive games, right? I mean, it's about talking about things with other people who enjoy talking about being a left winger or something.
That's right. And there's no there, or if there is, it takes you forever to get to the bottom of it. Or you start seeing that like these people are living in much more conventional ways than many other folks, like they'll identify as this or that, but then you see it's just like this standard cishet relationship with all of these linguistic trappings laid over it for PR and human resources purposes. You see this and you're just like, oh, okay.
Oh, completely. I mean, the game of sort of centering identity, right, may have started for good or bad reasons, but certainly whatever it's become is largely to be weaponized by sort of straight cis people to claim queer identity, right?
They're all queer now, or sapiosexual, or what, like these million different sexualities that just mean, oh, I'm into this thing for this, and it's like, oh, it's not a sexuality. There's no oppression there.
I'm a straight white guy, and I identify as my kink is being attracted to straight white women, and I'm a protected class.
Yeah, you bottom for them, bottom for my wife, this type of thing. And you're like, and like you it's just, that's insane, right? Like to you guys, right? It's just bizarre. It
comes off a little strange. We probably are a little on the outside of certain kind of cultural gay trappings, just by doing Marxism is not necessarily what they're doing in the clubs these days. But it passes the time, I suppose. I did want to ask you a little bit about some of your work, as we alluded to, and as you mentioned, you are a long-time strength athlete, and this is a community you've both participated in. You are swole AF, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. I mean, for a non-steroid user, and who's 37, I'm a strong guy. Yeah. I mean, not by the standards of like the the most juice people, but yeah, sure. I'm in good shape.
But go check out Oliver's Instagram, and you can see he's swole. But kind of curious, and then you've also sort of written on some of the topic about like male bodies, right? And this sort of I'm kind of curious. The podcast is called Twink Revolution. Twinks are a particular expression of male bodies. Kind of curious where you see that intersection, right? I mean, it's not the masculine ideal at all, but it's a thing apparently.
Well, I would go when I was teaching history, I was a professor at the University of Texas at Arlington. And like when I really punched out there, like in 2013, 2014, I was teaching the intro to U.S. history survey, which, is usually just like big battles or like, it's like it's just online assignments, there's a whole bunch of those. But I would give like 2 days to showing erotic male only physique photography to the students. This is not the best part of this. Like, so I'd go through slide after slide of like pictures from David Chapman's American Hunks or something like that, of men who would be both like considered like classically like ephebes or twinks or however you want to say it. And then, like to a more muscular build, Steve Reeves types. And then you start getting into like steroid era. So I'd be flicking through all this and really talking full frontal in some cases, 2 classes of this to 200 kids. Half of them were there because attendance wasn't mandatory and the lectures were filmed. So at that point, 100 is pretty good. Like you're doing a pretty good job. But I'd show this. And then at the end of the semester, I would get these surveys back and they'd be like, it's great to have a conservative professor like you, just love conservative viewpoints at this school. Everyone else here is so liberal, and I'm like, I'm doing classes on like cartoons, 2 classes of essentially pornography, and like all of the professor watch stuff that allegedly comes in to, bug these classrooms or whatever, not only is absent from it, but everybody just assumed all of the students just assumed I was a Republican.
And so I began to think a lib, was that or just because of the erotic content?
I think it was my self-presentation. I think that I presented this content like mostly stuff that was taken by like gay male photographers. That's who would pay Jack LaLanne to get naked.
Yeah.
And I would present it to the kids and in just with my usual presentation style. And apparently like they see what they see, they got something out of the lecture about, how bodies have changed. And the fact was, it was deliberately all men. Like it's like only men for 2 lectures. And there's a whole thinking behind it. Like, well, I'm a male professor. Like, I don't want to bring this other stuff in because again, it's not I haven't been embodied. That was like this whole thing behind it, this thinking behind, I'm not embodied that way. So I don't understand that, all that stuff. But by the time I had done it, like for the 4th time, and the results were always the same, I was really left puzzled by the whole thing. But putting that aside, I guess it's just always been fascinating to me about how, and this ties into it, by the way, like it's always been fascinating to me how people will sort of identify you with your like somatic makeup, right? Like, so your body and your voice and your presentation, almost no matter how much you try to cover them up too, right? Because sometimes it seems to me like you can inflate somebody with testosterone or change their shape a bit, and this stuff still is, these markers are still noticed by people. So these body types, presentations, characteristics, I don't necessarily think they're any realer than any other cultural construct, but while I was lecturing on those constructs, people were like shaping their own perspective of the presenter in front of them, and it just sort of puzzled me. So in terms of that concept, like the sort of the twink concept, it seems to have like a freestanding existence of its own, regardless of the content that you put around it. But it seems to be. But is it a political identity? Is it something that goes beyond that? I don't think so. But I think it's something that orients. I think it's something that orients how you look out at the world and how the world looks in at you, because your body, your presentation, it's the first thing that you see. But it like, to me, that's just the starting point. There's a million other things that go on. There's a million other things that go into a person's life, and then but for some reason we've now gone in the other direction. So I was interested in like the evolution of bodies, different body shapes, body presentations, etc. And I've written a lot about that, but I don't tie it explicitly. I keep it specifically apart from politics in a way, because from being in the world of doing like physical activity and lifting weights, you begin to see that a lot of those folks, their political beliefs, their sexual orientations, it's all very complicated. Mm-hmm. It's not what you think it is, but it's also not what determines, or it shouldn't be what determines how they're going to behave politically as like a political actor in the world. I don't think, but
isn't it meant to be that if you anybody engaged in any physical activity for fitness or for aesthetic purposes is surely just trying to reproduce the sort of Nazi workers movement, fascist youth. Surely, it couldn't be anything else.
Yeah. That's immediately where they go. Do you know how many people want me to write that article?
I've already seen it.
Oh, really? Yes, sorry, you've been scooped.
There was an article about right wingers having like, if they're more muscular or like attractive, they're more likely to be right wing. And then I'm like, being on Twitter, maybe it's not completely like false, but just kind of going off of that, like we do see those alleged left attacking masculinity, whatever that means. Never really define a unified term of what masculinity means. How has that kind of played into your work and being a person that is quite muscular? Like, do you ever get attacks because of your masculine?
Well, you nailed it right there. Though that article has been coming out every year for since 2007 or 8, or whenever people really started, whenever the online like take industry, online press really started getting fired up. That story has kept coming out. And there's occasionally like the left wing man who's working out to get himself in shape. Like Mel, a couple years back, not written by me, did something on the swole left, and it was like 4 guys who were like kind of in shape. And I just began. To me, that's all nonsense. Number one, like some of the best power lifters that I know, and some of the biggest steroid users that I know are gay guys and always have been. So that goes right out the window, in my opinion, and always has. Anybody that's been around those folks, just that goes out the window right away. The intersection between like a steroid habit for a guy who's in the business of being a bodybuilder, and then like his supporters or patrons or schmoes, if you will, who are usually men who are paying for him to hang out, provide services potentially, etc. It's all webbed together so closely and in such a complicated way, even if the person ultimately who is being patronized this way is like very homophobic in public, that I just throw all that crap out the window. Not how big or small you are doesn't say a whole lot to me about where you stand. I mean, like one of the most homophobic WWE wrestlers, and I had the misfortune, although the piece was good and I got paid well for it. But this guy, Lars Sullivan in the WWE, wrote about how he was going to be the next big thing for the Ringer. And he seemed like it. I mean, the dude could do like a one-legged squat on a balance bar. He was squatting like 600 pounds. Jesus. He was 6'4". I mean, just in great shape. But more and more kept being learned about him. Like the first thing that happened was he made tons of homophobic comments on bodybuilding.com in the early 2000s, just like everybody, apparently everybody else.
We were all doing that.
Just went on that.
Every gay person.
At exactly the same time, or maybe a few years later, he was also doing gay for pay pornography, like lots of it. And so these two things came, and you can watch it if you look him up. You can go and watch it. And he, so like that right there, that's a strange case. Something's going on there. But what that says about him politically, I think actually he was, some of his tweets, like they labeled him alt-right or something like, they love to label people alt-right with their various tweets. Like, oh, he liked this tweet, so he's alt-right, I helped with an article about that where we looked at some like the dude that did the Oculus Rifts. I actually researched his tweets for a month to see what he was liking. I got paid to do this by Vice. Really? And then an article came out about like he's liking a lot of alt-right tweets. He's probably alt-right. And that was the story.
It's sort of fascinating how people that like the trick of reducing people to identity was something that sort of stood apart from politics, right? A statement like a gay Republican or something was not an incoherent idea. But we've almost like we've even lost our vocabulary of stupid identity labels to the point where like liking one tweet you are now alt-right, or in the case of something like What's Left, right? Amy in incidentally agreeing with positions that might be held by some conservatives or things like that for very different reasons ends up being called a crypto-fash or whatever.
It was just effective ammunition to sort of drive her off at that time. And she wasn't, was kind of naive about it. I've never been naive about that stuff. Those people, like when I often have been joking for a while about like doing the work. If you look at my Twitter feed, I say that at least 10 times a day. Yep. And that's because, as you guys have seen, like when people who quote unquote work in the labor movement, right, or like work in the activism movement or something, like whatever, work in one of these things, they're always talking about, you got to do the work, you got to do better, you got to be here for, you got to show up, you got to turn up. And this is all just jibber jabber, right? But they have their own way of maneuvering within that world. They have their own way of, it's sort of like in a world of non-work and non-ideas, you advance by performing like a hall monitor, like the skills that you honed as a tattletale or a hall monitor or something are really helpful. So calling people out, reaching out to HR, reaching out to, moderators, reaching out to this, banding together behind the scenes. Targeted campaigns against folks. All that stuff works. It works really well. You don't want to get on their bad side, or you just want to avoid them. They're just like nothing people. They have nothing to say.
They are scary. I mean, and to the extent that one of the trends I've seen, I think, is that to even suggest that they are overstating the case for the rise of a dangerous, like actually organized Nazism or fascist movement in the U.S. Is to basically be doing fascism.
Yeah, everything is. I mean, if you keep saying that much, I don't know who isn't. I mean, everybody's bashing the fash. Everybody is fash. And it's even the more conventional, like Chapo follower lefties are like mocking this a little bit now. Perhaps it's a sign that it's losing its. Well, never had any explanatory power, but perhaps it's a sign that this is a little. We're getting into sort of a ridiculous, like it has the power that, like, calling someone a communist in the late 40s had. In those cases, there'd probably be better actual connections of people to that cause. And here, it's like you liked a couple tweets, or you got in a fight with the wrong person from the wrong magazine or podcast. And again, for me, it doesn't matter as much because I don't work within those communities and my writing doesn't reach those audiences. And I'm not political in the way that those folks are political. They're like, I'm not taking positions because I'm not like developing a compromise position or announcing that I can finally criticize Warren now that the campaign's over. I don't care. I really don't like. That's just like that's such a sense of self-importance. That I just don't have really. But that world is so weird. And so really, like when I kind of joined up with Amy in the podcast, an opportunity to talk about that world was interesting to me, because I've been writing about it. Some of my pieces, for Splice Today and other things, deal explicitly with these people, this type of work, what it's like to write hot takes, what it's like to write personal essays and hot takes for other people. So like I've written Me Too stories, under other people's bylines, just make it up, Oliver. Okay.
Wow.
Whatever you want.
We'll get you to author our inevitable Me Too, or Sam's Me Too
whatever
against me.
Whatever you want. Yeah, I'll talk something that you guys did to each other, and it'll be horrific. And it'll really win some sympathy, and you can do whatever you need with that. Yeah, everybody's got to have a little bit of trauma, but the fact that people were outsourcing that told me what a commodity it was.
Yeah, that's horrifying. I kind of assumed people at least I assume there's some copy editing going on, but the editors are just ghostwritten is pretty horrifying.
If they're not working directly with somebody, or like a friend is assisting them, like by the time it gets to the editor, if the editor just gets a pitch that sort of they know is going to drive traffic or be talked about for a while, then they can sort of manipulate it, especially if the writer is a weak or inexperienced writer. They can manipulate it into just a piece of junk. Make it into a real piece of trash that everybody's going to be talking about. It's going to be on all the lips. Everybody's going to be retweeting it, which is horrible, right? But that's one form of being famous. In these personal essays, if you don't carefully control the narrative of what you're saying, or you could be made to look ridiculous, and or you could choose to be ridiculous in the essay,
it brings to mind Caroline Calloway and her her personal essay format, that the sheer ridiculousness of it is the product, I think.
She's moved to the next level. They've taken that up to the next level of sort of commodified fraudulence. But it's obvious. Like, what is even anything if everything is admitted to be a scam and a hustle and a profit making? Well, what is it but what it already was, which is just capitalism, right? So it's just buy a McDonald's hamburger at that point. It's the same thing. That's about as an honest a product under capitalism as you can get. It's a piece of shit. It's good, terrible at the same time. It's everywhere. It's the same. Eat it and kind of go to sleep feeling mildly sick. It's a good thing. And that's what some of these, like, a lot of people aspire to that. Even these lesser, more idealistic little brand people, like, at the end of the day, they would love to be as successful as the McDonald's hamburger or the Pepsi Cola or the Bic pen. Those are all really good products.
It's socialism TM, right? Is the brand you're selling.
If socialism works, if it works for you, you can get rich from socialism. You can get rich just from selling the idea of socialism. It doesn't even have to happen. Probably your career will depend on it not, so that you can keep selling it longer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You need to take over the organizations and operations that, unions, everything else. You need to be the one doing it. So obviously pay you.
Well, I love to see right-wing establishments like The Hill are taking on more left populist figures, what's her name? Katie Hill? No.
Crystal Ball.
Crystal Ball.
Yeah.
Like her. They're just, I've seen more of the right-wing owned or right-wing leaning media taking on these people because they attacked Warren or Biden or whatever.
Well, and it sells, right?
Yeah, it sells.
Surely
Crystal Ball is a pro, though. Like I said on a What's Left podcast, she'd say anything if the money was right.
Well, in her campaign, she had school choice or charter schools.
She's a centrist Dem. Yeah, she's a centrist Dem. That was her. That was her approach. She was an economics background, CPA. And she just kind of moved from position to position over the years, but has stayed in the mix. That's all that matters. So, if she was studying someone's tweets, right? If studying the feed of some other left personality, it's not because you believe it, just so you learn the talking points. Anybody can say the talking points. You go out there and do Rush Limbaugh's job and you fine. Your money would have to be right, but you could do it. And there's people that would do that.
Oh, that's the end point of our grift. We're gonna podcast our way till we get we get to replace Rush Limbaugh's time
Well,
slot.
the Hill comes and says, we need you guys on there.
Yeah.
It's going to be in service of the right wing cause, so we're going to need you to bash Republicans and Democrats, but it's all good. Here's your money.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And,
to be clear, we're on board. Like, if anybody's offering that deal, we'll take it immediately.
I always joked that like RT or Teleswerve will just like one day give us a platform. It'll be like the worst thing ever made. RT gets a gay brand.
They should. Despite the politics of the regime, I think they throw it on they definitely throw it on the channel. I mean, Jesse Ventura is on there. It's it's open, it's open season. I mean, any of us would probably go on there, except for the ones that like to scold about it on the tweets or something. But then they would go, they'd go too. And then they just say, well, I'm going to change it from the inside.
Yeah. Wanted to change tax a little bit. It won't have escaped, I assume, your notice or anybody listening's that the world is fucked from multiple dimensions. Both, I think, the collapse of the Sanders campaign, which you have examined pretty carefully, or you and Amy have both talked about at length. But thinking a little bit about like what sort of our coronavirus reality is telling us a little bit about like the actual mechanics of the world we live in. And just thinking a little along the lines of like, you've got sort of anarchist mutual aid, being held up as like, well, this is, AOC, right? Tweeting about mutual aid networks. The other hand, you're seeing sort of, state and local governments fighting out with federal governments and trying to provide a sort of a coherent state response, but still within the logic of like markets and capitalism. What are you sort of taking away from this? Or what do you feel like you're learning as you're sort of seeing the world fall apart in this specific way?
I think there's a lot of things at work. At the turn of the last century, like the life expectancy was like 48, 49 years, tuberculosis, influenza, that was just knocking people out left and right. Urban areas were, guaranteed to shorten your life a little bit just by dwelling there. Like Pittsburgh had cholera outbreaks in the 1930s. Death was among those people in a way that it isn't today. So there's number one, there's a tremendous fear of death in the West, which is funny because the places that are just getting wiped out immediately are those pens and concentration camps where we put the elderly. So those places are getting nuked immediately because they're being run by underpaid staff who are, if you're getting $9 an hour, why are you going to wash your hands, right? Like just wipe the next ass, move to the next room. I worked in a group home, so I know the drill.
Yeah.
Wiped a lot of asses in the day. But like that's part one. And then part two is, there are multiple potential reasonable strategies that could be employed, but it's now here, especially and probably everywhere. It's very much a political issue. So how it's going to play out, political in the way that one side says something silly, the other side says something silly, and they sort of battle back and forth over nothing. But they're filling airtime, right? Like so, CNN, you turn it on, you think it's the apocalypse. Fox News, you turn it on in America, it's morning in America again. We're reopening, we beat it. You've got different views. Then, in terms of working, and I'm still working because I'm essential, along with the people I work with, we're all labeled essential for the moment. But you talk to them and they're just going to work every day. It's very, very, I'm remote. I work from home. My job can be done from home. I'm one of those people. So at the same time, it's just strange, and I don't know where it's going. I don't know what the end point of it is. Certainly it's revealing hard truths about the nature of these various economies and how many jobs are superfluous.
Well, yeah,
you could scrap 40% of the jobs in this country, but at the same time that they're superfluous, like no one's willing to implement even the most like draconian system of just giving people script, like some kind of company money to consume and live in like a home, like they're not willing to take that step. No, we got to get them back into the meat plant or the, out on the old, some other, like into the Amazon box factory or something like that. You got to have them out and about. And at the end of the day, it's just it's like the perfect problem that we're not set up to respond to. I mean, like the new Zizek book on this, the pandemic book, that's like a collection of the things he churns out related to that, has kind of a hopeful tone that it's going to, make us, think of this or that. I don't know what it's going to do. I really don't.
I feel like the most, maybe sort of the grimmest 1-2 punch that came was sort of the collapse of the Bernie campaign, and it's sort of it's
a COVID charity now.
Yeah, well, certainly that. I mean, seeing that it was essentially not up to the challenges which it which it was obviously always going to face, right? From it's kind of the postmortem saying, well, Bernie would have won if the Democrats hadn't resisted him with all their might. You're like, well, fuck off. Of course, then like it clearly wasn't fit for purpose. But the other one being sort of seeing a left, and I use that in quotes, response, which is sort of wants to effectively hold back from the like all our productive capacity. Think about like what do we actually have to fight back with? It's sort of only our labor. And so it's sort of weird that you wouldn't essentially use like capitalism as your main response here. It's all we have, right? It's the only game in town. It's that and COVID charities that used to be presidential campaigns.
Yeah, because I mean, as long as people's like nutrition, like food network, supply chain, et cetera, is provided for by like a capitalist system of exchange, prospects for like the general strike right now, at a time when many people are just trying to generally get fed, it just doesn't seem like it's not that it's like an impotent response. I get why people, especially if you've never thought about the nature of that stuff, like I get why it's sort of attractive. Like me being the king of the world is an attractive thought, but that's not, that doesn't mean anything, It's just another one of these castles made of air that's not going to go anywhere. The same with the idea ultimately of, like massive widespread, we're never going to pay rent again. We're never going to pay this again. I mean, again, setting aside the fact that there probably should be rent ceilings in areas and all kinds of other things, like there's just no. It's the terrible thing is there are no plausible left suggestions in the toolkit anymore. Like they were much more likely to have come in the late 1920s when the majority of organizers were, people that had come out of the actual working class that like there's still enough like of a distribution chain. There's still enough of a cushion here that we're not seeing the like Hoovervilles and these sort of other like dramatic, like the Oki lines, this type of stuff. We're not seeing this type of stuff at the moment here. So it's kind of hidden in a way, and there's just not any. Other than like people turning themselves into sort of one-man armies, and commandeering the methods of production on Twitter, there's just not a lot. I mean, there are ways. I mean, certainly a command economy response to this could have been different. Absolutely. I mean, but also, the response of a country that could have instituted immediate surveillance of its citizens, right? Like that could have been different. A police state, a true like total police state, could have probably had a different response. A country with different infrastructure, a country with a different system of government, but none of those things are present here. And all of those things, like just like people would say, I want to throw out the Electoral College. I mean, there's a greater chance, of Jesse Ventura winning the presidency than the Electoral College being thrown out.
Well, I wonder if there's sort of this LARPing. There's an online LARPing, right? Which maybe goes back to your original point about the sort of it being a type of politics that pays, but the belief or the imagined belief that, for example, a general strike right now, when huge numbers of people are not working, are literally have been made surplus to the requirements of the machine,
or being fired,
or being laid off in huge numbers. Right, the idea that like you're unemployed. What leverage do you have in a general strike? What are you going to do? So I'm wondering if you've sort of seen that playing out as part of some greater greater trend, or is
I mean, from the corporate side of things, like they're certainly evaluating as upper management and so forth goes on furlough or takes salary cuts. I think that all eyes are certainly on how many people actually need to be involved in the operation for it to. And it's not just one company, right? It's probably every company.
Everyone,
and I think universities and schools, right? Like, if you're not Western Governor University or the University of Phoenix already, and you're not Harvard, you're certainly going to be thinking how much physical plant do we need? How many people do we need? I mean, the one takeaway from this is probably just going to be the recognition that, which was one thing that people have sort of projected, that a lot of work is make work, even if it's underpaid. And once we have the opportunity to recognize that it's not needed, we're not going to have it. Where they'll go, I don't know. But like, I mean, there's going to have to be a mass recouping, right, of this loss in shareholder value. And that, like, almost always when things I've dealt with, like there's a big loss in shareholder value, what's the first thing to go? What's the easiest fix? It's to cut jobs / payroll.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it in even companies that are potentially sort of still financially viable. They're like, fuck it, revenue went down, cut the workforce by 50%.
With those, especially in like the middle management and upper management trench, there's a lot of bodies up there that you can cut. You can run with a skeleton crew and have just as much success. I mean, there's a lot of, and that's a quick fix, but it's going to leave a lot of surplus population, and then there'll have to be a solution for that. It's not a $1,200 Trump check. It's. And I mean, like that is something where they'll have to think of some realistic solution, because you just can't have that many. I mean, for the purpose of stability, in a capitalist society, you can't have that many bodies just idle. Something will have to be done, and I'm not going to dictate what they do, but I'm sure that they're already considering alternatives. As that looms. I mean, they'll try to ride it out as long as they can, of course, because, if some kind of like script, house money or universal basic income has to be paid out, you want to pay it out as late as possible and make it as little as possible so that you can still keep most of the value for yourself. I mean, that's right. Just the nature of what the, corporate entities and the people that run them are required to do. Nothing that you can, it's awful. It's an awful thing. And I personally, I don't see a way out of it. I don't know where, like in HR, like one of my mentors is always like, one day they're going to come for me. One day I'm going to get the call. Yep. And he just did. Oh, so, hey,
it would be kind of amazing to have that level of exuberant optimism, to believe that like the answer to all of this is like the DSA or something.
Well, I mean, the answer to the people running it is it. The answer to whatever is making me money is the answer. But the answer to actually like the problem of organization and capacity in a gigantic society, it's hard to do the budget for a $20 million business unit. Like, imagine trying to do that across a $1 trillion economy. Imagine trying to puzzle out how to move all these people and pieces around. Like, when you only have, like, in terms of your interactions with people, you only have so much time, you only have so much control. How the hell do you do it? I don't know. I mean, I spent grad school like digging into the meat and potatoes of, school finance litigation, school finance in general. And one, I found that like most of the people working in education are just charlatans, right? And most of that research is make work. But two, it seems like there's just no way to account for the money, right? Like, you could give more money, but it's just going to often be fed into programs, just people like teach girls how to code, and this kind of horse shit, right? That's really not there to teach girls how to code. It's there to teach people it's there to give whoever's running that 501c3 or that tie-in operation a salary. At the end of the day, that's what all these things, 90% of these things are.
Right.
Gives the good stuff a bad name, but like most of this stuff is just somebody came up with some like rich, like fail kid came up with this idea, and they're like, oh, I just really want to help, whatever that means, right? And helping just means like, I really want to have a salary, you know, I really want to rehab some, maybe gentrify this neighborhood a little, you know, that's what they think deep down. That's where their mind goes. And a lot of them, even if they don't, and I say this on the latest podcast that hasn't come out yet, like, people are going to behave the way their class trains them to behave. So like, I grew up skeptical, distrustful, you know, think everybody's out for themselves. But a lot of these people grow up and they're like handshakers. They're natural, like business organizers and fundraisers, PTA people. They have that. Those are their instincts. And so this is setting up, you know, like some liberal Republican parents' kids who joined the DSA, right? Like that's a natural to rise to the top of that organization.
Oh yeah.
Those are the best socialists are always, conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans, right? Or their kids, because they've been successful at business. Probably they know how to run it like a business. Not that I think it should be run like a business, but that's their model. That's what they grow up thinking. Do I think it's going to work out well for anyone? I don't know. I don't know that it's ever worked out for anyone historically, right? We've been pretty rotten for a while. But we have air conditioning now. That was always my big takeaway historically. Like we air conditioned the South and even began to air condition the global South in the 1920s and 30s. So that was a big one. And we have antibiotics for now until the resistance gets too bad from us, like pumping them into beef cattle and chicken and so on.
Yeah.
Like, so we got two good things going for us. And then the rest of it's looking a little rough, but you know, you take with the good, with the bad, you know?
Yeah. Well, on that optimistic note, we'll look forward to the Twink Revolution Teach Twinks to Code School.
Guys, get on that. Get on that. Like that's good. And then it's not just beefy gay guys that can code. It should be it should be the ones you think should be cutting up dresses or something.
Exactly.
Change the stereotype.
Yeah. RuPaul's drag code.
RuPaul's made a lot of money.
Yeah, fracking.
God bless him.
Oliver Bateman, thank you so much for joining us. Check out Oliver's website, oliverbateman.com. Check out the What's Left podcast. Anything else you wanna plug while you're here? No, that's it. Enjoyed being on here, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.